Dartmouth, Cole Harbour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased to have a chance to speak to this motion and to try to live up to the performance of my colleague from Cape Breton-Canso. I want to congratulate my other colleague, the member from Bonavista, Gandon, Grand Falls, Windsor, for bringing this forward. And I particularly want to congratulate my colleague from Halifax West, who was the minister, the regional minister in Nova Scotia, who negotiated the Atlantic Accord, along with Premier Ham and the Prime Minister of Canada and our Finance Minister. I'd like to preface my comments, if I could, Mr. Speaker, by just a thought. You know, Mr. Speaker, as MPs, we come to this place, and I think most of us come here in the best of intentions. We come here to represent our constituents, and we come here to act in a respectful and honourable manner. But every day at about 2:15, that kind of goes out of the window, except on Friday, Mr. Speaker. Outside of question period, we get along, we travel together, we discuss issues, and that's the way that it should be. Every now and then it goes beyond question period. November the 4th of 2004 was one of those days when the motion brought forward as an Opposition Day motion, which was prefaced by this statement that this House deplore the attitude of the Prime Minister of Canada at and following the First Minister's Conference, blah, blah, blah. Mr. Speaker, it was a motion designed so that Liberals couldn't support it, even though at that very moment we were negotiating the Atlantic Accord, which came into being less than a month later, or about a month later, and was enacted a month after that. On those occasions, we had allegations, we had charges, we were, as Liberal MPs, we were pilloried for no reason, Mr. Speaker, except for politics, and that's shameful. Because at that point in time, the Prime Minister, the Minister of Finance, the member from Wascana, the Minister from Halifax West, then the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans, Dr. John Ham, the Premier of Nova Scotia, a good and decent man who represented his province well, were negotiating the Atlantic Accord. And we had worked on this for a long time. And the member from Wascana could tell you, and I'm not alone in this, that when I would see him anywhere in the parliamentary precinct, he would say, look, we're working on it. And it's not easy, you know. And I know it wasn't easy. We knew that other provinces would say, you know what, maybe that isn't fair. But when it came forward and the Atlantic Accord was produced, it was not only adopted by the Prime Minister, the Finance Minister, and the members from Atlantic Caucus, but I'm proud to say that my Liberal colleagues from other provinces, where this accord was attacked, stood with us and voted for the Atlantic Accord. Hear, hear. It was difficult. It wasn't easy, but it got done. Today, I stand here with my colleagues to talk about this motion that we've put forward. And we've heard from comments that have been made by my friends on this side, of comments that were made on that day on November the 4th, which have turned out to backfire on Conservative MPs. We've heard the comments of Danny Williams. We've heard from Rodney MacDonald. We've heard from the Premier of Saskatchewan. I'm not going to give you a lot of quotes from other politicians. I just want to give you some sense of what the media are saying back in Nova Scotia. Because the media are very unbiased. In fact, most of them in Nova Scotia aren't particularly friendly to Liberals. But we have headlines like, the day after the budget, the Prime Minister wants Nova Scotia to stay a have-not province. We have another one, we need a fighter. And in this article by David Rodenizer, he says, Nova Scotians are left asking themselves, who's standing up for us? Right now, the answer is nobody. Certainly not our federal cabinet minister, who's defending Ottawa rather than Nova Scotia on this, and not even the Premier, who's content to pursue process rather than take action. And this after the Premier had taken some action, moderate at least, to indicate his displeasure. Here's another one. Note to Rodney, the Prime Minister played you big time. Down in the text of this article, message to Rodney by Marilla Stevenson, the article by Marilla Stevenson, the Prime Minister has played you like a fiddle. If any theme rang out through the Harper budget, it was that the have-nots are to remain have-nots.
Harper budget.
When we're quoting news articles or other documents that we don't use each other's proper names, but ridings or titles, please.
Here's another one. They think we're fools, apparently, but we're only the have-nots. We don't carry our weight. Maybe we don't pay our own way. Most of all, we have only a few federal seats. In the big picture, we don't count for much. Here's one, another one, entitled, Federal Conservatives Shaft Province Once Again. Here's a good one today. Jane Purvis turns on federal Tories. Jane Purvis, the Chief of Staff to Dr. Ham, who helped to negotiate the Atlantic Accord, who was announced to much fanfare a week or so ago that she was going to run for the Conservatives in Halifax, has taken a look at the budget and she's thinking twice. Jane Purvis is an honourable woman. She may decide to run for the Conservative Party, but she is having second thoughts and saying that I think whether it's understandable or not from a national point of view, it puts our province in a really difficult position to choose between the Offshore Accords and a different equalization formula. Here's a good one. Atlantic Tories are running for cover. Now, I can't mention their names, but there were signs, this by Stephen Marr, there were signs that East Coast Tories were not enjoying the situation. One of them, who I won't mention, who some expect to retire rather than face the wrath of Mr. Williams in the coming election, did not comment. Another one, normally among the most vocal MPs on the Hill, was not available for comment. Another one did comment, but not until first his office said he was unavailable, and then he struggled to defend the new equalization deal. Not a good day for Atlantic Canadian Conservatives. Here's one: Harper stoops to conquer.
Just remind my colleague again to use riding names or titles.
In most cases, Mr. Speaker, but I missed a couple. The Prime Minister stoops to conquer. Jeering from the sidelines were the budget's unlucky trio of obvious losers: Nova Scotia, Newfoundland and Labrador, and Saskatchewan. All are now victims of a calculated insult, the effective federal clawback of resource revenues under the new equalization scheme. So, Mr. Speaker, you know, it's not Liberals, or it's not just Liberals and New Democrats who are saying that this is a bad deal for Atlantic Canadians. It's everybody in Atlantic Canada, with the exception of a few Conservative MPs. Now, we've seen hints coming. In the last budget document, the Atlantic Accord was questioned. It says in this document, the February 2005 agreements to provide Nova Scotia and Newfoundland and Labrador additional fiscal equalization have been criticized widely as undermining the principles in which equalization is based. We've seen quotes from the Minister of Finance earlier this year, in fact suggesting, Minister of Finance said, this was in Corner Brook on March the 8th, Corner Brook, a great part of Newfoundland and Labrador, with great representation. And he said, I can say, as the Prime Minister has said, that we will respect the Atlantic Accords, the Minister of Finance told reporters. Another Conservative member from Newfoundland said the Atlantic Accord will not be adjusted. Will not be adjusted. It's written in stone. It's signed, sealed, delivered, and it's something that the province need not have any fear of. Clearly, that's not the case. And today, we heard the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance suggesting that the Atlantic Accords were gerrymandered and that previous fiscal arrangements were disjointed and knee-jerk. Mr. Speaker, I can tell you, in Atlantic Canada, nobody thinks that the Atlantic Accords were disjointed and knee-jerk. Now, we have some good guys representing the Conservative Party in Nova Scotia. I like most of them. The member from Cumberland, Colchester, Musquodoboit Valley is a good person. He's a little too far left of his current crew, and I think he's been marginalized. He wouldn't tell you that, but I think he feels that way. He doesn't have any say in this sort of stuff. He got hammered with this. The member from South Shore St. Margaret's, he's married to a cabinet minister in the Rodney MacDonald government, the government that slammed the deals. How'd that conversation go Monday night? I have to wonder. These guys know that they've been betrayed by a government that doesn't care about Atlantic Canada. We don't have enough seats. We don't have enough seats. Now, today, an article in, I think, the Globe and Mail, there was a headline, "Budget bashers displaying regional jealousy," says the Prime Minister, suggesting those who don't like the budget have a regional jealousy. Well, that's what we're elected to have. We get elected to represent our people to come here. We don't come to Ottawa to bring the message back to the people. We get elected in Ottawa to bring the message here from the people. That's what we're supposed to be here doing. That's our job. Now, Mr. Speaker, the people of Nova Scotia expect their MPs to represent them here in Ottawa. Mr. Speaker, in the last election, we were bombarded with Conservative ads. You may recall them. A sign and a car going by and honking the horn twice, beep, beep, and then stand up for Canada. Mr. Speaker, that horn is sounding again. That horn is sounding again. And the people back home are saying to the MPs from Nova Scotia, honk, honk, stand up for Nova Scotia. And they should do that.